Hello everyone and welcome back to Stories and Stuff. Today we're going to be talking about creating a premise for your novel. So NaNoWriMo is starting next week, and in celebration of that I wanted to create a variety of videos on generating ideas and generating that word count needed to win NaNoWriMo. I am going to be attempting to take part this year, and lots of my students taking part with me, so these videos are kind of designed to help the ideas flow and to get those words down on the paper. And today I thought I'd talk about something a little bit different from the traditional popular videos of outlining your novel. Outlining is really important, and it's something that I will talk about in another video, but actually for today we're going to be taking a step backwards and thinking about a premise. Now, I've already talked about story ideas before, but a premise is kind of the next step between that and outlining your novel. Generally, what happens is people tend to come up with ideas for moments in a novel that they would really like to see and really want to write. Then, in terms of plotting, it's a case of joining the dots between those moments that we've already created in our heads. But that doesn't necessarily create a story that's going to work well on paper. That is simply joining together a series of unconnected moments. So by thinking about a premise, we can then flesh out the story, make it feel more real, have more gravitas for our characters, and generally improve the overall feel and quality of our writing. So what do I mean by a premise? Well, a premise is actually used quite a lot in screenwriting, but it very easily translates over to novel writing or indeed any kind of story writing. You can imagine a premise being a little bit like the blurb on the back cover of a book. In a few lines it tells you everything you need to know to get a taste and flavour for the story without necessarily knowing all of the details. You may really want to write a story and have an idea for a few moments, but if you create a premise based around those moments and based in a world that you're happy to write in, then you're going to make it a lot easier on yourself to tell the story. So what are the ingredients that you need for a premise? Well, the first thing that you need is where the story is set. Now, this could be a completely imaginary world, or it could be in the very world that we live in, but you need to decide that because that decides the rules that govern the conflict of the characters. You can't have conflict between two nations that don't exist in the world that you're writing in. So by thinking about your setting, you're automatically creating opportunities for conflict and character development. And I've talked about this in a couple of world building videos that I've made before, and I'll link those down below. Even if that world is present day Earth, then your character is going to have a certain perspective on that. The world that I live in will be different from the world that someone down the street to me lives in, because I have different experiences in this world. So you need to think about what kind of world your characters live in and what status they have within that world. Sometimes this is self-explanatory. If someone is a school child, then that immediately puts in place boundaries, puts in place a hierarchy, puts in place immediate conflict and opportunities for conflict. But sometimes it requires a little bit more imagination, so it is really important to think about. If you're really struggling with creating that idea of a setting, then have reference points and think about existing worlds that you can build on. So dystopian as a genre is a really good example of this. It takes our modern world, takes one thing from that modern world, puts a twist on it by exaggerating that thing, and all of a sudden you have a brand new world. So The Hunger Games, for example, is our world set in maybe a couple of hundred years' time, but it's taken the idea of reality TV shows and how far we can push reality television and has expanded upon that and exaggerated upon that, so that you end up with actually a completely different and quite sinister world. So try and work with the things that you like and the things that you're inspired by as reference points to start with. So you could say, right, okay, for the time being, magic is governed by hand gestures, and that's all we're going to think about. Again, there's more references about this kind of thing in my world building videos, so I would suggest that you check those out if that's something that you want to really get your teeth into. Once you've done that, you should have an idea of opportunities for conflict, and that's where your antagonist and protagonist come in. You're going to need an antagonist and a protagonist. Your antagonist or your bad guy doesn't have to be a person. It could be a force of nature. It could be the protagonist or the hero himself, some aspect of him or her. But you need something that's going to provide that conflict, and this is the point to start to think about that. And of course you need some kind of hero. Now that hero doesn't have to be stereotypically heroic, but you need someone that you want to follow around and see the world through their eyes. So that's really important to think about, and at this point you can maybe even think about if you want more than one hero. So at this point you should have a setting, a bad guy and a good guy. I've talked about how to create your premise sentences again in my Generating Ideas video, but you want to have an idea of then how the moments that you've thought about, that you've initially developed your story ideas from, you want to think about how those moments fit into the setting, hero and villain that you have created. If you have clear ideas on starts or endings or climaxes or inciting incidents or anything like that, then write those down and get them down so that you have something to work from and work outwards from. But it's not exactly necessary to have those plot points concrete from the start. Lots of writers write in a non-linear fashion and write random chapters and build their books up that way, so it's perfectly acceptable to kind of do that. But as long as you have a setting, an antagonist and a protagonist in some shape or form, then you have many opportunities for conflict, and that's what you need when you start outlining, because otherwise you will find yourself desperately trying to draw tenuous links between moments in your story and moments in space and time that simply do not work together. Everything needs to work on a cause and effect basis, so once you have a setting and a set of rules for that setting, then that's how you can build up those cause and effect ideas. As you can probably tell, I'm a big fan of working from a world and building from that. I think it's really important, especially in the genre that I write in. You may find that you really want a character-driven plot, and therefore your characters are going to be more important. You may find that you plan and outline and create your premise in a completely different way, and that's absolutely fine because this is a creative process and everyone does something differently. But if you are struggling, these are some things that you can use to help you think about what elements you may need in your story and also what opportunities there are for conflict. So that's just a couple of quick tips on how to develop a premise for your novel before you start outlining. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you like what you see and you want to see some more writing, reading and art videos, please subscribe, that would be fantastic, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.